Hey Storystream fam. Welcome back. First off, thank you to everyone who followed our last mystery, The Wake of Ash. Your theories, your support, and your sharp eyes mean the world. Today, we're pulling on a brand new thread. And trust me, it's already unraveling. This is Threaded Truth, a story that starts with a chance encounter at a thrift shop, a coat that fits a little too perfectly, and a hidden message stitched into the lining. Find him before it's too late. If you're new here, you've picked the perfect time to join. This is the kind of mystery that gets under your skin and stays there. So hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because this thread only leads deeper. Threaded Truth. Part 1. The message. I didn't mean to buy the coat. I wasn't even supposed to be downtown that day. I had taken the long way home to avoid construction, made a wrong turn near 5th and Mercer, and ended up on a block I didn't recognize. The buildings were older, red brick with soot-streaked windows, stooped like they were ashamed of still standing. There was a crooked little thrift shop tucked between a shuttered bakery and a locksmith whose sign had lost half its letters. A bell above the door jingled when I pushed it open. The place smelled of cedar and mothballs. The lighting was dim, the kind of yellow that made everything look a little dusty, a little forgotten. Racks of clothing leaned like tired soldiers, and glass display cases held trays of jewelry too gaudy to have ever been fashionable. I should have left, but something caught my eye. A coat. Midnight blue, long to the knee, with sharp shoulders and a high collar. It hung on a mannequin in the back, almost hidden by a rack of wool sweaters. I don't know why it pulled me in. It looked ordinary enough at first glance. Maybe a little too tailored for someone like me, someone who lived in hoodies and carried stress like a second skin. Still, I found myself walking toward it like I'd remembered it from a dream. I touched the sleeve. It was heavier than it looked. Thick wool, almost velvet to the touch, but dense, as if it could stop wind or time itself. The lining was a deep grey satin that shimmered faintly under the low light. It fit like it was made for me. Not metaphorically, literally. The shoulders didn't pinch. The sleeves hit just above the wrist. Even the collar curved around my neck like it knew my shape. I looked in the mirror above the counter and almost didn't recognize myself. I looked taller, sharper, like a different version of me had stepped forward and offered to take the rest of the day. The coat didn't have a price tag. Found something, came a voice from behind me. The shopkeeper was old, older than the shop itself, maybe. Wiry white hair and deep folds in his face like crumpled paper. He looked at the coat, then at me. "It suits you," he said. "There's no tag," I replied. He waved a hand. 20. That felt absurdly low, but I wasn't about to argue. I fished out a 20 from my wallet and handed it over. He didn't give me a receipt, just smiled and slid the bill into a drawer. When I turned to leave, he said something I almost didn't catch. "Be kind to it, and it'll be kind to you." I paused. "It's a coat." His smile didn't fade. "All things remember where they've been, especially the ones that are worn." I stepped out onto the sidewalk, pulling the coat tighter against the wind. It was suddenly colder than it had been when I went in. Late afternoon had slouched into early evening. I must have stayed longer than I thought. It wasn't until I got home and took the coat off that I noticed the lining wasn't entirely smooth. Near the left inside pocket, the stitching was slightly uneven, like someone had re-sewn it by hand. I ran my finger along the seam and felt the faintest ridge, a bump where there shouldn't be one. My curiosity prickled. I grabbed my sewing kit from the junk drawer and carefully unpicked the stitches. A small piece of thread-covered parchment was folded and tucked inside, no bigger than a business card. I expected a name or a receipt. What I got was a message, embroidered in tiny, impossibly neat letters. "Find him before it's too late." I stared at it, waiting for it to make more sense the longer I looked. Who was him? Too late for what? Was this a joke? A prank left behind by the previous owner? I tried to laugh. It came out dry. I flipped the fabric over. No other writing. No numbers. No initials. I restitched the lining and folded the coat over my arm, staring at it like it might blink. Maybe it was nothing. Someone's lost embroidery project. Or an inside joke. Or something else. I told myself I'd forget about it by morning. But I didn't. That night, I dreamt I was standing at a train station I'd never been to, wearing the coat, surrounded by people whose faces I couldn't quite make out. A man in the distance was calling out to me, waving. I couldn't reach him. I kept trying to move, but the floor felt sticky, like molasses. His face blurred and brightened, and then I woke up. The coat was hanging on the back of my bedroom door. but it wasn't where I'd left it. I stared at the coat hanging on the back of my door longer than I cared to admit. It wasn't just that it had moved. I mean, sure, I could have left it there. Maybe I tossed it up without thinking. But something about the way it hung, perfectly centered, collar just so, sleeves draped like arms folded in thought, it didn't feel like something I had done. It felt placed. Still, that was easier to swallow than the alternative. I shook off the unease and got ready for the day. As I left for work, I paused by the door and looked at it again. "Be kind to it," the shopkeeper had said. The words echoed, not ominous, just persistent. I grabbed the coat and threw it on. The morning air was brisk, and the weight of the fabric settled around my shoulders like armor. It was warmer than it should have been, like it had stored heat from somewhere else. At the office, people noticed. My coworker Janine raised her eyebrows when I walked past her desk. "Someone got an upgrade," she said, giving me an approving nod. "Fancy coat. Designer. Thrifted," I replied. $20. She gave a mock gasp. "That thing. $4.20. It looks like it should come with a glass of scotch and a boardroom." I laughed, but my fingers tugged absent-mindedly at the sleeve. Work passed in a blur, emails, spreadsheets, phone calls I barely remembered making. All day, I felt like I was watching myself from outside my own skin. I caught myself glancing into reflective surfaces, computer screens, dark windows, even the chrome of the microwave in the break room. Each time, I felt a flutter of recognition. Not at myself, but at something near me, behind me. That night, I unbuttoned the coat slowly, more reverently than I meant to. I laid it across the back of the couch and stood staring at it like it might do something. It didn't. But I had the same urge I'd had the night before, to check the seams, to feel around the edges. I ran my hand along the lining again, slower this time, pressing gently. That's when I found the second bump, smaller than the first. On the right side, near the hem. I hadn't noticed it before. Carefully, I fetched the sewing kit again and began unpicking the tiny hand stitches. Inside was a slip of fabric even smaller than the first, almost like the corner of a handkerchief. The thread used this time was darker, nearly black. The message was crooked, rushed, like it had been stitched in fear. "Your time is not your own." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't the words. It was the implication that someone had sewn not one, but two messages into this coat. Someone who was desperate. Someone who wanted to be heard. I checked the seams again. All of them. Nothing else revealed itself. I thought about going back to the shop, but when I called the number listed online, I got a generic voicemail box. I left a message. "Hi, I bought a coat yesterday. There were things in the lining. I just wanted to ask." I paused. What was I even going to say? I'd appreciate a call back. No one did. That night, I had the dream again. Or almost the same. I was at the train station, wearing the coat. The man was farther away this time. Still waving, still calling out to me, but now his voice sounded underwater. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't cooperate. I yelled, but no sound came. Then I looked down. The coat had threads coming out of it. Long red threads that stretched out behind me like puppet strings. I followed them with my eyes. They led up, into the sky, into something I couldn't see. And when I turned back, the man was gone. I woke up in a sweat. The coat was lying on the foot of my bed. This time, I knew I hadn't put it there. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't concentrate, and frankly, I didn't trust myself to behave like everything was normal. I spent hours digging through the coat, examining it with a flashlight and tweezers. I turned it inside out. I opened the seams down to their baselines. Nothing else. But I did find something else odd. The lining wasn't consistent. Most of it was satin, yes, but a patch under the left armpit was slightly different. Shinier, almost metallic. I hadn't noticed until I held it under direct light. There, embroidered faintly into the fabric itself, not a separate patch, not thread, but somehow part of the weave, was what looked like a symbol, a circle, a needle, and a pair of scissors crossed beneath it. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't a brand. It wasn't on the outside label, if the coat had ever had one. I snapped a photo and ran it through reverse image searches. Nothing. No hits. No matches. Just a lot of generic sewing blogs. But I couldn't shake the feeling I'd seen it before. Later that evening, I headed out to the thrift shop. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe they had records, donation slips, anything. But when I turned the corner onto Fifth and Mercer, the shop was gone. I stood staring at the empty storefront, which looked like it had been that way for years. The windows were boarded up. The doorframe had splinters. The shop on the left was still the bakery, now replaced with a vape store. The locksmith was still there, unchanged. But the thrift shop vanished. I must have checked the address 4 times. Same street, same storefront. But the thrift shop I'd wandered into just days ago had vanished, leaving behind a husk of peeling wood and plywood windows like scars on an old face. The building wasn't just closed, it looked abandoned, like it had been that way for years. Ivy crept up the brick, dead vines clinging to the mortar like desperate fingers. I walked up to the door, half expecting some hidden bell to ring or the lights to flicker on. Nothing. The glass had been replaced with a plank of rotted wood. Someone had spray painted over it years ago, judging by the faded red streaks. I stepped back and looked around. The bakery turned vape shop next door was buzzing with neon. A bored-looking kid in a beanie glanced at me through the window as he stocked shelves with vape cartridges. I pushed open the door. "Hey," I said. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up slowly, one eyebrow cocked. "There used to be a thrift store next door. Do you know what happened to it?" His expression didn't change. "You mean Olmo's? That place has been gone for years, man. Shut down when I was in high school." My stomach tightened. "Are you sure?" He gave me the kind of look reserved for people who don't hear themselves sounding crazy. "Yeah, owner died, like, 2016, I think. Stroke or something. No one took it over. Olmo. Old guy. Creepy eyes. White hair. Smelled like dust." I nodded slowly, thanked him, and walked out. My heart pounded like I'd just run up a hill. The man he described, white hair, dusty smell, that was exactly who sold me the coat. I remembered his words clear as day. "Be kind to it, and it'll be kind to you." So who had I spoken to? And how did I walk into a store that had supposedly been closed for nearly a decade? Back at my apartment, I laid the coat on the kitchen table and turned it over again, this time with purpose. I examined the strange embroidered symbol again. The circle, the needle, the scissors. It looked too precise to be random. More like a crest. Or a brand. I snapped a clearer photo and posted it on a few message boards. Sewing groups, obscure fashion forums, even a Reddit thread about arcane symbols. I phrased it like I was curious, hoping someone might recognize the emblem from a brand or boutique. I wasn't expecting a reply so quickly. About an hour later, a user called Threadchaser76 responded with a single line. "That's not a brand. It's a mark." I messaged them immediately. "A mark of what?" Their answer came back minutes later. "Some tailors used marks like this during the 1800s. Not common. The symbol you're showing has been linked to a group called the Needlemakers Circle. Don't know much, just legends. Mostly stories about coats that remembered things. Items that carried echoes of their owners. Urban folklore stuff. That coat of yours. Where did you get it?" I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, I typed, "A store called Olmo's. Downtown." There was a long pause. Then another message popped up. "Walk away from it. Don't wear it again." I asked why. "Because if it is one of theirs, you've already invited it in." I closed the laptop. I wanted to believe this was just internet dramatics. Someone playing up the creep factor for attention. But I couldn't shake the cold weight of his words. "You've already invited it in." I went to the living room, where the coat still lay on the table like a sleeping animal. The light in the room had shifted, casting long shadows from the coat's folds. I could almost imagine it breathing. I pulled out a pair of scissors. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Then I pressed the blade into the coat's inner lining. It didn't cut. I pushed harder. Nothing. The fabric held like steel. No tear, no give. Just a flat, perfect resistance. I blinked and tried again, this time with a utility knife. I sliced downward, and still, the blade skidded uselessly across the fabric. That's when I noticed something even stranger. Wherever I touched the coat, my fingers left faint warmth. Not from my body heat. No. This was active warmth, like the fabric remembered the contact and echoed it back. I touched the collar and watched as the fabric pulsed with subtle warmth, like embers under soot. I backed away and left the room. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up in bed, the coat in the other room behind a closed door, and felt like something was listening. Not outside. Inside the coat. At 3:17 a.m., I heard a noise. Not loud, not dramatic, just the sound of something falling. I got up slowly, padded down the hallway. The door to the living room creaked open. I flicked on the light. The coat was no longer on the table. It was standing upright, hanging from a hook on the wall. But I hadn't put a hook there. And as I stared at it, frozen in place, a gust of cold air blew through the room, despite every window being closed. Inside the coat, something moved. I kept the coat in the hall closet the next day. Not folded, not stuffed, just hanging there, as though it had always belonged. Every time I passed it, I could feel it watching me. Not with eyes, of course, but with presence. It was like entering a room with someone already inside. Quiet. Waiting. I told myself I needed answers. That I'd return to Olmo's again. Maybe the store would reappear the way it vanished. But I wasn't that naive anymore. I knew what I'd seen. The decay, the boarded up front, the kid next door saying it had been shut for years. Yet that didn't stop me from walking back there again. Twice. Nothing had changed. Just the same cold, abandoned shell. No sign, no Olmo, no coat racks. Only silence. So I tried something else. I took the coat back out, laid it flat on the kitchen table under full light. The embroidery in the lining, the needle and thread forming a loop, the scissors pointing down like a blade, looked even sharper in the daylight. Not frayed, not worn. Almost new. I turned the coat inside out and traced every seam with my fingertips. And that's when I noticed it. A thin pocket, nearly invisible, sewn into the inner lining. A hidden compartment. I felt something flat inside. My breath hitched. Carefully, I reached in and pulled out a small piece of yellowed paper, folded once and tucked so precisely that I might have missed it if the lighting had been any dimmer. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. There, in faded black ink, was a short line of elegant, cursive handwriting. What was taken can always be returned. That was it. No signature. No date. Just that cryptic message. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. Returned. What had been taken? I wasn't sure why, but I thought immediately of the dream I'd had the night before. Or, had it been a dream? The memory blurred at the edges, but I remembered shadows stretching across my floor, the sound of scissors snipping in the distance, and a voice murmuring something unintelligible in the dark. When I woke up, my bedroom door had been slightly ajar. I didn't own scissors. I turned the note over, hoping for something more, and found only a faint watermark, almost imperceptible unless held to the light. A crest, similar to the one embroidered in the coat. The needlemaker's circle. The same symbol that online user had warned me about. I returned to the laptop. Threadchaser76 hadn't responded to my last message. I sent another. I found a note inside the coat. It said, "What was taken can always be returned. Do you know what that means?" The message sat unread. Frustrated, I turned back to the coat and did something I hadn't dared since the first night. I put it on. The moment it slid over my shoulders, a chill rippled through me, like stepping into a room someone had just left, still thick with their air. But it fit me perfectly. The lining clung to my skin like a second layer. Not tight, not uncomfortable, just intimate. I walked to the mirror. Something looked off. My reflection stood stiffly, as if it wasn't entirely mine. The coat gave me a sharper silhouette, stronger shoulders, longer lines, but my face, my eyes, they didn't look right. They looked too alert, too knowing. And then, something happened I can't explain. I blinked, and for a split second, I wasn't seeing myself in the mirror. I was seeing someone else. A man. Taller than me. Paler. Dressed in the same coat but in an older style. Black gloves, cravat at the neck, his face solemn and still. He stood in the same position I was in, his eyes meeting mine through the glass. Then I blinked again, and it was me. My hands shook as I pulled the coat off and dropped it onto the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I backed away from it like it might lunge at me, but it didn't move. It just lay there, folds falling naturally, almost apologetically. That night, I didn't dream. Or, more accurately, I didn't sleep. I stayed up reading, digging deeper into anything I could find about the needlemaker's circle. And that's when I found something that changed everything. A scanned article from a 1942 local paper. The title: Missing Persons Linked to Taylor's Secret Society. The story described a string of disappearances, 5 people, all last seen wearing coats or garments made by a now-defunct tailors' guild rumored to operate under the name, The Circle. A few fringe researchers speculated that the clothing acted as vessels, capable of absorbing memory or identity, and perhaps even projecting it onto new owners. One line stood out in bold. Witnesses claimed the garments seemed to change their wearers, altering behavior, posture, even speech, before they too vanished. And just below that, a name. Olmo J. Greaves. Founder. Master Tailor. Presumed dead in 1951. That's impossible, I thought, because I had met Olmo just last week, and he'd handed me that coat with a smile. I couldn't go to work the next morning. I tried. Showered, dressed, poured myself coffee that tasted like ash, but the moment I opened my apartment door and saw the coat hanging on the knob, I shut it again. I hadn't left it there. That coat had been lying on my bedroom floor the night before. I remembered clearly. I'd thrown it there after the mirror, after I saw him, whoever he was. But now it hung from the knob with purpose, like it had been placed there to block my exit. Its sleeves drooped slightly empty, but they still gave me the impression of arms ready to grab. I stood there staring at it for maybe 5 full minutes, unmoving, coffee cooling in my hand. Then I turned and walked back inside. I had to know more. About the circle. About Olmo. About what it meant to wear something stitched by a ghost. I pulled out the yellowed note again. What was taken can always be returned. What had been taken? I thought about those people mentioned in the 1942 article, the ones who vanished after wearing the garments. What if they weren't missing in the traditional sense? What if they had been absorbed somehow? Consumed? Transferred? I shook my head. That was ridiculous. But was it any more ridiculous than a building that didn't exist, or a man who'd supposedly died 70 years ago handing me a coat that whispered when no one else was in the room? Still, I needed something real. Something grounded. I decided to do something simple. Something normal. I took the coat to a tailor. Just want to get it appraised, I told her. A short woman named Mina who ran a tiny alterations shop across town. She wore thick glasses, a measuring tape draped like a scarf. Curious about its age, materials, maybe the design. I think it's vintage. Mina nodded as she examined it. Her fingers moved like she was reading Braille. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she said, "Where'd you get this?" "A little shop near the east side," I lied. "Does it mean something?" Her expression darkened. "This stitching," she said, brushing the inside lining. "It's old. Handcrafted. But not local. Not American. European. Maybe Eastern Bloc. The threadwork here, it's like nothing I've ever seen." I leaned forward. "You recognize it?" She hesitated. "I've only seen one coat like this before. Years ago. A man brought it in for repairs. Said it belonged to his grandfather. It had the same symbol on the lining. Same stitching, needle, scissors, the works." "What happened to him?" Her lips pressed into a line. "He never came back to pick it up." A chill tightened around my spine. "I kept it in the back for a while," she continued. "But the longer it sat in my shop, the more strange things started happening. Lights flickering. Machines acting up. Customers getting nervous for no reason. So I threw it out. And..." She gave me a look. "It came back." I swallowed. "What did you do?" "I burned it," she said flatly. "Burned it myself, watched it catch flame. Left the ashes in an alley. It didn't return after that." She pushed the coat back toward me. "If I were you, I wouldn't wear it. And I definitely wouldn't keep it." I thanked her and left. The coat in my hands felt heavier now, like her words had stitched themselves into the wool. I didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, I walked the city for hours. Past the old factories, down alleys where shadows never left. It was late afternoon when I found myself standing in front of the abandoned storefront where Olmo's had once been. Only it wasn't abandoned anymore. The boards were gone. The door freshly painted. A sign in the window read, "Greaves and Company. Fine tailoring, by appointment only." I blinked. My heart pounded. This wasn't possible. I'd been here. I'd seen it empty, rotted, condemned. And now, it looked brand new. Against better judgment, I reached for the handle. The door swung open without a sound. Inside, the store was dimly lit, soft with golden hues. Rows of suits, coats, and mannequins lined the walls. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume. It was silent, eerily so. I stepped inside. No bell rang. No footsteps. But I felt something shift. Like someone had just walked out of the room a second before I entered. Then I saw it. At the far end of the room, on a raised wooden platform, was a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw myself. But I wasn't alone. The man from before, the reflection who wasn't me, stood behind me in the mirror's surface, close enough to touch. He wore the coat as if it belonged to him. His eyes met mine through the glass, calm and ancient. Then he smiled. I turned around. Nothing. Empty room. When I looked back, the mirror was blank. And the coat in my hands was gone. I don't know how long I stood there in that tailor shop, staring at the empty space where the coat had been just moments before. My hands were still curved as if I were holding it. My breath came sharp and fast, fogging up the mirror across the room. The faint scent of cedar and iron lingered in the air, as if the coat had disintegrated into nothing but memory and dust. A ticking sound cut through the silence. Not a clock. Softer. Like thread pulling taut. I stepped closer to the mirror. My reflection blinked back at me, no longer distorted, no longer accompanied by the stranger. Just me. Pale, breathless, with hair mussed from the sudden static tension in the air. I turned my attention to the racks lining the walls. Every coat, every suit, perfectly aligned, tailored to invisible owners. But as I passed each one, I noticed a pattern. Tiny symbols etched into their linings. Most were faded, but still visible if you knew where to look. The same embroidery I'd seen on my coat. Scissors. Needle. Thread winding into an open eye. I shivered. "May I help you?" The voice came from behind. I spun. A man stood in the doorway I hadn't noticed before, dressed in a midnight blue suit with pinstripes so thin they looked drawn in pencil. He wore gloves, which struck me as odd for a tailor. His hair was slicked back. His face, forgettable in an unsettling way. It wasn't that I couldn't describe it. It was that I wouldn't be able to pick it out of a lineup 5 minutes later. He smiled thinly. "Looking for something in particular?" I hesitated. "I came in by mistake." The door was open. "That's all right," he said, stepping forward. "We get few walk-ins. Fewer still with your taste in garments." His eyes flicked to my arms, still faintly held in the shape of the coat I'd lost. "I had a coat," I said. "From here, I think. A man gave it to me." "Olmo." The tailor froze. "I'm sorry," I added. "Do you know him?" After a long pause, he responded. "Olmo hasn't worked here in many, many years." "That can't be right," I said. "I saw him. He gave me the coat just last week." "Then you must be mistaken," the tailor said, his voice tight now. "Because Olmo's been dead since 1943. I stared. "That's not no." I spoke to him. He stitched something for me. "I still have the..." "No," he said, firmer. "You had the coat. And now you don't." My mouth went dry. "Did you take it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward a small door behind the counter. "If you'll come with me, I think we can clear things up." Every instinct told me not to follow him. Every horror movie I'd ever watched screamed, "Don't go through the mysterious door." But the need to understand outweighed the fear, for now. I stepped through the doorway. The back room was dim, lit by a single bulb swinging lazily from the ceiling. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, most covered in dust. But on one table near the center, a coat lay spread out. My coat. Or a replica of it. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Because you think it's yours," the tailor said. "But it's not. None of them ever are." He moved to the table and pulled something from beneath the coat, a sheaf of yellowed papers. He handed them to me. A list of names, each followed by a date and a short note in cursive. "Returned. Taken. Stitched." One line, near the middle, stopped my breath. "Sarah Eddings. Returned. Host incomplete." That was my mother's name. I flipped the page. There she was again. This time, the note read, "Thread severed prematurely. Artifact unstable." My hands trembled. "What is this?" The tailor watched me closely. "Inheritance," he said softly. "Some garments pass down bloodlines, carried through generations, like a curse woven into the lining." "No," I said, backing away. "No, she died in a car accident. That has nothing to do with..." "Did she?" he asked, tilting his head. I felt a buzzing in my ears. The room felt too small. The fabric bolts too close. I want to leave, I said. I don't want any part of this. You already are part of this, he said gently. The coat chose you. That thread, it runs deep. Deeper than your memory. Deeper than blood. I turned to run. But the door I had come through was gone. In its place was another mirror. This one cracked through the center. My reflection looked back at me, but just slightly off. The same posture. The same clothes. But not the same eyes. My reflection raised its hand. Slowly. I hadn't moved. And then it pressed its palm to the glass. A whisper bloomed in my ears, like silk tearing apart. What was taken can always be returned. I stumbled backward. The tailor did nothing, just watched. Then, in the reflection, I saw the coat again, folded neatly over my other self's arm. And my reflection began to smile. And that's just the beginning. A message in the lining. A dream of someone calling out. And a coat that doesn't want to be left alone. If you're already hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2, where the coat reveals its second secret, and something starts pulling back. Drop your theories in the comments. Who do you think he is? What was taken? And why does this coat feel alive? And if you want bonus content in a shorter form like Reels, please give us a follow on Instagram at Storystream. Thanks for joining us. Just remember, all things worn remember where they've been. Especially the ones that never really leave you.